Hello everyone, I am here to talk about optimism. What is optimism? Optimism blah. Optimism optimism isn't all about being happy and seeing the glass half full. There's a lot more to that. Optimism has three things that fit into it, which are confidence, hope, and future. With these three things, optimists see things a lot differently and believe that anything can be accomplished without fail. Except fail is acceptable. They'll always keep trying to reach their goals in the end. I am now gonna show a clip from a TED Talk that I came across about optimism bias. And it should explain mostly everything from here now.
To lie in a brain imaging scanner. It looks like this. And using a method called functional MRI, we were able to identify regions in the brain that were responding to positive information. One of these regions is called the left inferior frontal gyrus. So if someone said, my likelihood of suffering from cancer is 50%, and we said, hey, good news, average likelihood is 30%, the left inferior frontal gyrus would respond fiercely. And it didn't matter if you are an extreme optimist, a mild optimist, or slightly pessimistic, everyone's left inferior frontal gyrus was functioning perfectly well, whether you're Barack Obama or Woody Allen. On the other side of the brain, the right inferior frontal gyrus was responding to bad news. And here's the thing, it wasn't doing a very good job. The more optimistic you were, the less likely this region was to respond to unexpected negative information. And if your brain is failing at integrating bad news about the future, you will constantly leave your rose-tinted spectacles on. So we wanted to know, could we change this? Could we alter people's optimism bias by interfering with the brain activity in these regions? And there's a way for us to do that. This is my collaborator, Ryota Kanai, and what he's doing is he's passing a small magnetic pulse through the skull of the participant in our study into their inferior frontal gyrus. And by doing that, he's interfering with the activity of this brain region for about half an hour. After that, everything goes back to normal, I assure you. So let's see what happens. First of all, I'm going to show you the average amount of bias that we see. So if I was to test all of you now, this is the amount that you would learn more from good news relative to bad news. Now we interfere with the region that we found to integrate negative information in this task, and the optimism bias grew even larger. We made people more biased in the way that they process information. Then we interfered with the brain region that we found to integrate good news in this task, and the optimism bias disappeared. We were quite amazed by these results because we were able to eliminate a deep-rooted bias in humans. And at this point, we stopped and we asked ourselves, would we want to shatter the optimism illusion into tiny little bits? If we could do that, would we want to take people's optimism bias away? Well, I've already told you about all of the benefits of the optimism bias, which probably makes you want to hold on to it for dear life. But there are, of course, pitfalls, and it will be really foolish of us to ignore them. Take, for example, this email I received from a firefighter here in California. He says, fatality investigations for firefighters often include, we didn't think the fire was going to do that, even when all the available information was there to make safe decisions. This captain is going to use our findings on the optimism bias to try to explain to the firefighters why they think the way they do, to make them acutely aware of this very optimistic bias in humans. So unrealistic optimism can lead to risky behavior, to financial collapse, to faulty planning. The British government, for example, has acknowledged that the optimism bias can make individuals more likely to underestimate the costs and durations of projects. So they have adjusted the 2012 Olympic budget for the optimism bias. My friend who's getting married in a few weeks has done the same for his wedding budget. And by the way, when I asked him about his own likelihood of divorce, he said he was quite sure it was 0%. So what we would really like to do is we would like to protect ourselves from the dangers of optimism, but at the same time remain hopeful, benefiting from the many fruits of optimism. And I believe there's a way for us to do that. The key here really is knowledge. We're not born with an innate understanding of our biases. These have to be identified by scientific investigation. But the good news is that becoming aware of the optimism bias does not shatter the illusion. It's like visual illusions, in which understanding them does not make them go away. And this is good because it means we should be able to strike a balance, to come up with plans and rules to protect ourselves from unrealistic optimism, but at the same time remain hopeful. I think this cartoon portrays it nicely, because if you're one of these pessimistic penguins up there who just does not believe they can fly, you will certainly never will. Because to make any kind of progress, we need to be able to imagine a different reality, and then we need to believe that that reality is possible. But if you are an extreme optimistic penguin who just jumps down blindly and hoping for the best, you might find yourself in a bit of a mess when you hit the ground. But if you're an optimistic penguin who believes they can fly, but then adjusts a parachute to your back, just in case things don't work out exactly as you planned, you will soar like an eagle, even if you're just a penguin. This is, by the way, why people prefer Friday to Sunday. It's a really curious fact, because Friday is a day of work and Sunday is a day of pleasure, so you would assume that people will prefer Sunday, but they don't. It's not because they really, really like being in the office and they can't stand strolling in the park